Mom, I think someone is following me. If anything happens, I love you. That was the last message Sandra Owens ever received from her 17-year-old daughter, Rachel. There was no context, no follow-up, just that one chilling line and then silence. No more calls, no more messages, nothing. And from that moment, Sandra's world would never be the same. It was a quiet Friday evening in Brookdale, a small, tight-knit town where neighbors waved at each other, where teens rode their bikes freely, and where tragedy was a distant concept, something that happened to other places. Sandra had just finished folding laundry when her phone buzzed on the countertop. She picked it up, expecting a casual, "I'm on my way" from Rachel, who'd been visiting her best friend just 2 streets away. Instead, her heart dropped as she read the text. She stared at the screen, frozen. For a second, she thought it might be a joke, one of Rachel's dramatic teases. But the pit in her stomach said otherwise. She dialed Rachel's number immediately. It rang once, then twice, straight to voicemail. Sandra's breath caught. Her mind raced through all the worst possibilities a mother could imagine. She called again. Still no answer. Then she grabbed her car keys and flew out the door. Within minutes, Sandra reached the Petersons' house, Rachel's best friend's home. But Rachel had already left. She left about 20 minutes ago, Mrs. Peterson said, her face tightening with concern. She said she was walking home. That was a 5-minute walk, tops. Sandra's heart pounded as she scanned the sidewalks and nearby yards. Nothing. No sign of her daughter. She drove the streets of Brookdale in circles, calling Rachel over and over again. Her calls went unanswered, her voicemails unheard. By 11 p.m., Sandra was at the police station. She's 17, the officer had said. She might have gone to cool off somewhere. Let's give it a few hours. But Sandra knew. She knew something was wrong. Rachel wasn't perfect. She had a bit of a rebellious streak, sure, but she wasn't careless. And she would never send a message like that if she wasn't scared. The next morning, Rachel was officially declared missing. Brookdale turned upside down. Flyers with Rachel's smiling face papered every pole, gas station window, and mailbox. Volunteers combed the streets, the woods, the creek behind school. Local news stations picked up the story. Cameras rolled while Sandra pleaded into the mic. "If anyone knows anything, please, I'm begging you, say something." The entire town held its breath, but the leads were few and far between. Rachel's phone pinged its last signal near the outskirts of town, around 9:35 p.m. The last known sighting came from a grainy gas station surveillance camera, which showed her walking alone, looking over her shoulder as if she felt someone was there. And in the background, barely visible under the yellow haze of a streetlight, was a figure. Tall, distant, following. That figure would become the ghost that haunted the Owens family for the next 15 years. In the first few weeks, the police questioned everyone. Friends, ex-boyfriends, neighbors. There were rumors she'd run away to California, that she'd been spotted at a diner in Kentucky, that she had been lured by someone she met online. Each tip was a dead end. Each sighting was a mistake. And with every passing day, Sandra's hope began to rot into something colder. Grief without a body. Rachel's room remained untouched. Her bed neatly made. Her favorite sweater still draped over the chair. Her cat, Marble, would sit by the window every evening, staring out as if waiting for her to come home. After a year, the media attention faded. After 3 years, the case went cold. Detectives rotated. Files collected dust. The public interest dimmed. But Sandra refused to give up. She kept Rachel's story alive through social media. She ran a Facebook page called Find Rachel Owens, where she posted memories, updates, and emotional pleas for information. Her son, Daniel, who had once been Rachel's protector, grew hardened, angry at the system, at the silence, at whoever had taken his sister. He vowed never to stop searching, but neither of them could have imagined that the truth was still out there, living, breathing, inside someone who had remained silent all these years. 15 years later, in 2023, a man named Liam Carter walked into a police station across state lines. He was a truck mechanic, mid-30s, quiet and withdrawn. He sat down across from the duty officer, and said 6 words that would rip open a case that had long been forgotten. I know what happened to Rachel Owens. The stranger's words echoed in the quiet interview room like a sudden clap of thunder in the dead of night. I know what happened to Rachel Owens. Detective Harris leaned forward, heart thudding in his chest. He had heard too many false leads before. 15 years worth, each one raising hopes only to dash them again. But something in the man's trembling voice and haunted eyes told him this time was different. The man introduced himself as Liam Carter, a former truck driver, and he looked like he hadn't slept properly in years. I can't carry this anymore, Liam said, fingers nervously twisting the frayed edge of his sleeve. I saw something that night, something I should have reported. The detective didn't breathe. Go on. Liam swallowed hard, staring down at the table as if the weight of the truth physically pressed on him. He spoke slowly at first, voice barely above a whisper. I was 20 years old, new to long-haul trucking. I was paired with this guy named Darren Lewis. Experienced, quiet, kept to himself. He wasn't the kind of man you ask questions. He paused, clenching his jaw as a shiver ran through him. That night, we were passing through Brookdale. I was in the sleeper cab trying to get some rest when I heard something off. A noise. A voice. I thought maybe it was the radio or I was dreaming. But then I heard again someone crying, begging. Detective Harris leaned back slightly, trying not to interrupt the flow. He let the silence settle. I pulled back the curtain. Liam continued, and I saw her, Rachel. I didn't know her name then, but it was her. She was in the front seat, taped up. She looked terrified. His voice broke. He took a shaky breath. I asked Darren what the hell was going on. He just turned to me and said, "This ain't your business, kid." Just like that. Cold. Like she wasn't even human. A bitter silence filled the room. Liam's eyes were watery now, full of regret and something deeper, shame. I should have done something. I wanted to. I really did. But I was scared. Darren, he had this way about him. Like if you crossed him, you disappeared too. He shook his head. That night, we pulled into this abandoned rest stop off a forested road. Darren told me to stay in the truck. He got out with her. I stayed behind, frozen. 10, maybe 15 minutes passed. When he came back, he was alone. Detective Harris gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles white. Liam looked up. He never mentioned it again, just kept driving. A heavy silence settled between them before Harris finally spoke. Why now? Liam hesitated. Because it's been eating me alive. I see her in my dreams. I see her face every time I pass a rest stop. I thought I could forget, but I can't. Detectives jumped into action. Within hours, they began retracing Liam's old routes. Darren Lewis wasn't hard to find. He'd retired to a remote property in Montana, still driving short routes under the radar. A warrant was issued. His truck, rusted but intact, was seized. Darren denied everything with unnerving calmness. Not a flicker of emotion, not a crack in the facade. Just a rehearsed shrug and a cold stare. But the team didn't stop there. They followed the route Liam described down to the mile. The old rest stop was still there barely. Overgrown, half swallowed by trees, littered with forgotten beer cans and rotted wood. It took hours, but when they started digging near the edge of the clearing, things began to emerge. Torn clothing, tape with hair strands, a rusted chain, and then something deeper, a shallow depression in the soil, surrounded by disturbed earth. It looked like a grave, but it was empty. A haunting chill spread through the team as they stood in the silence of the woods. Had she been buried there? Moved later? Had someone else found her? The DNA on the clothing came back a week later. Rachel Owens. It was her. Detectives informed the Owens family immediately. Sandra could barely stand when they told her. Her knees buckled, and she clung to the photo of her daughter she had carried in her wallet all these years. Her baby had been here. This place had swallowed her whole. The pain of not knowing had just transformed into a different kind of torment. Confirmation. But then, just days after the media picked up the story and began broadcasting Darren's arrest and the reopened case, the unexpected happened. A call came into the station from a quiet little town in Idaho. A woman, elderly, with a soft, shaking voice, said she recognized a girl in the news. "I think she's been living with me," she said. or at least someone who looks just like her. The call was taken seriously. Investigators rushed to the town with little sleep and less hope. These tips almost never led anywhere. But when they arrived at the tiny farmhouse nestled at the edge of a wooded area, everything changed. An old woman greeted them, hands trembling, wiping flour off her apron. She gestured to the back of the house. "She's out there," she said softly. "She doesn't talk much, but she's kind, and she's scared." A woman stood in the garden, facing away from them. Thin, frail. Her shoulders stiffened when she heard the steps behind her. Slowly, cautiously, she turned. The silence stretched as the lead detective stepped forward and asked, "What's your name?" The woman's lips quivered, her eyes filled with tears, and then she whispered, "Rachel. Rachel Owens." The air seemed to vanish from the world in that moment. She was alive. At first, no one spoke. The wind rustled through the trees around the quiet Idaho farmhouse, but within that moment, everything else seemed to still. Rachel stood frozen, her lips barely moving, her eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. "Rachel Owens," the detective repeated gently, as if afraid to spook her. She blinked slowly, then gave a tiny nod, barely visible, but enough. It was her. The detectives stepped forward carefully, trying not to overwhelm her. Her thin frame trembled. Her hair, once bright and flowing in old photos, now hung lifelessly past her shoulders. Her skin was pale, but her eyes still held a flicker of life, of someone who had endured too much and survived the impossible. Rachel didn't run. She didn't speak. She just stood there, as though waiting for someone to tell her it was safe to breathe again. The elderly woman who had called, the one who'd taken Rachel in, stood on the porch, clutching her hands to her chest. "She never told me her name," she whispered. "But I knew something had happened to her." The ride back to the station was quiet. Rachel sat in the back seat, eyes glued to the window, watching the trees pass as though they held the memories she couldn't say aloud. It was as if each passing mile peeled back the years she had spent in hiding, in silence, in fear. The medical team confirmed what everyone feared. She had been severely malnourished, suffering from old injuries never treated properly, and years of psychological trauma. But she was alive, and slowly, word began to spread. Sandra Owens got the call in the middle of the night. At first, she didn't believe it. Couldn't. "Mrs. Owens," the voice on the other end said, steady but emotional, "we found her. Rachel is alive." The phone slipped from Sandra's hand. She fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, not from grief, but from the relief of a mother who had mourned her child for 15 years and was now told that she was breathing. When they were finally reunited, the world seemed to stop again. Rachel stood in the hospital room doorway, unsure. Sandra, aged by the weight of 15 long years, crossed the room slowly. Neither of them spoke. And then, without warning, Rachel crumbled into her mother's arms, the years of silence cracking like shattered glass. They held each other like people trying to prove the other was real. Sobs racked both of them. Words failed. Only tears could speak. But what Rachel eventually shared, when she was ready, was darker than anyone could have imagined. The night she disappeared, she had felt it, that she was being watched. The street had been quiet, the moon barely visible behind thick clouds. She hadn't wanted to worry her mother, but fear made her fingers fly across her phone as she typed that message. "Mom, I think someone is following me. If anything happens, I love you." She never got the chance to press send. A hand grabbed her from behind, a sharp sting to her neck. The world spun, and then blackness. When she woke up, she was in the back of a truck, bound, gagged, and a man, cold eyes, cruel smile, was watching her through the rearview mirror. Darren Lewis. For months, she was kept in that truck, driven from state to state, always moving. No windows, no daylight. She was nothing more than a secret Darren guarded obsessively. He fed her just enough to keep her alive, spoke to her only in commands, punished her for speaking, crying, and resisting. He was a ghost during the day, a monster at night. The chains were real. The fear is constant. When he was finally tired of the road, he took her to a shack hidden deep in the woods of Montana. It was there she spent the rest of her captivity, 10 more years. No one around, no one to hear her screams, and Darren made sure of that. But Rachel never gave up. She memorized every sound outside, counted the days by the light through the cracks in the wood. She waited, planned, and hoped. And one night, when Darren was gone on a supply run and forgot to lock the outer door properly, she ran. She ran barefoot through the forest, bleeding, disoriented, but driven by a force stronger than fear, freedom. She wandered for miles until she collapsed near a road where Margaret, the elderly woman who lived alone, found her the next morning. Margaret never called the police. Rachel had begged her not to. She was terrified that if Darren found out she had escaped, he would return and kill them both. Margaret, sensing the depth of Rachel's fear and trauma, simply said, "You can stay. I'll protect you." So Rachel stayed. She worked in the garden, read books, slowly relearned what peace felt like. But her past never stopped haunting her. Every knock on the door made her flinch. Every passing truck made her hide. And when the news broke of Darren's arrest, Margaret showed her the screen. Rachel stared for a long time before whispering, "That's him." She knew it was time. Her testimony in court was devastating. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as Rachel, trembling but resolute, described 15 years of darkness. Darren sat motionless, offering no defense, only a cold stare. But this time his silence couldn't save him. The jury didn't need long. He was found guilty on all counts: kidnapping, false imprisonment, abuse, and more. He was sentenced to life without parole. Rachel walked out of that courtroom not just as a survivor, but as a symbol of resilience. Today, Rachel is still healing. She speaks little but writes often. She volunteers at shelters. She's learning how to live in a world that moved on without her, and slowly, she's building a new life. As for Liam Carter, the man who finally came forward, he visits Rachel's family once a month. He says he doesn't deserve forgiveness, and maybe he never will. But Sandra Owens says something different. "You saved her," she told him once. "Late, but still, you brought her home." This story is one of unimaginable horror, but also of unbelievable strength. Of a girl who was stolen, silenced, and nearly forgotten, but who found a way to survive, to escape, to live. And in a world filled with darkness, Rachel Owens became a quiet, powerful reminder that sometimes, even after the longest night, the dawn still comes. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe, like, and click the notification button. Bye for now, and stay safe.